Would you rather $130,407 or one of every card on the reserve list? Welcome back, folks. It's Brody, and today I've got an interesting question for each and every one of you. And I know what my answer is, so leave me a comment in the comment section down below. But if you take a look at today's economy and the amount of money that's being printed out there, 3 of the major currencies in the world, and see how that compares, it really gives us an idea of what's going on in the world of Magic the Gathering. Recently, we decided to watch the comedy show movie Dodgeball with Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn. And now that's a funny movie, but it really got me to thinking, when Vince Vaughn was doing whatever he could to save Average Joe's gymnasium, the bank lenders came to him and said, "You've got 30 days to figure out how to come up with this $50,000. Well, I started thinking about it, and then I got to thinking about Magic the Gathering. Let's take a look back over time, and there's 3 pieces of information I'd like you folks to consider when making your decision of whether you want to take the $130,470 or one of every one of the 572 cards or 567 cards on the Magic the Gathering reserve list. Now, the reserve list is a finite amount of cards that won't be printed again. And when we look at currency and the current monetary system, there really is no limit as to any amount of money that any one currency can print. Now, we're not talking about cryptocurrencies or digital currencies. We're talking about strictly fiat currency, either US dollars, the euro, and for my own case in point, the Canadian dollar. So if you look at the strength of the euro over the last 3 to 5 years, and I really get to notice this when we're watching the card prices on Brody's morning Magic the Gathering stock and talks, because there are some cards that are literally sitting at just about a 1-to-1 parity when you look at the USD price and the euro price. Now, that has to do with a couple of things. It can do to supply issues, and there may be more supply of certain cards in the European Union, but I'd like to think that it shouldn't cause that much of a difference. Now, when you see the strength of the US dollar when compared to the euro, the two are actually becoming more and more parity all the time. And now, if you remember, and if you've ever traveled, you may have had this challenge when picking up some currency and realizing just how much it costs to get yourself some euros, which is a little different when you're traveling to other countries where your local currency, gets you a 2-for-1 or a better exchange rate. And for any of you folks watching in South America, you may feel a little more like I do with the Canadian dollar as it compares to the US dollar. So those are a couple of things to consider. As the euro and the US dollar tend to start to move towards parity, we see the effect of modern monetary theory and money printing starting to happen by the amount of interest that we're paying on loans at the banks. Now, this doesn't seem anything fun and interesting or have anything to do with Magic cards just yet. But what it does bode to consider is the fact that banks are printing more money all the time, and they're doing that to service debt. And when you take a look at the dodgeball scenario, like I was talking about just a little bit earlier, that makes me feel a little bit like Wizards of the Coast when you look at how tough this economy is right now. If you go to your local store, and I mean your grocery store, how much is the cost of just your simple groceries? A loaf of bread is a pretty well-used example. If the cost of a can of soup goes from $2 to $4 overnight, wouldn't you rather having it sitting on your shelf than in the store? Because you're essentially creating your own bank account by storing your own goods. And if you're like me and you see these prices, including gasoline prices, regular day-to-day items that people have to buy, if you're not stocking up on them or buying them a little bit at a time, it really is amazing to see where the prices are going. And this is all caused by this inflation that we're seeing, with banks printing more money in order to offset the loans that they're giving out there. Now, in this economy, we just received the fourth quarter earnings report from Hasbro for 2022, and we can see that their cash on hand is lower than it was last year, and their debt is starting to incur more and more. They're incurring more and more debt. Interest rates keep climbing, whether it's on mortgages or commercial loans. They keep moving up just a little bit each and every year. So now Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast is almost like the average Joe's gym, and they've got all this debt that they need to service. So now what is it that they're doing? They're going out and doing car washes, and they're doing fundraisers and trying to get the pro tour going and trying to get this show on the road to get players out and drive people into events and get paper magic firing again. Now, what does this mean when it comes to the cost of $1 and what it buys you, as opposed to the cost of one of each and every card on the reserve list? We see the price of the entire reserve list as a whole sort of flattening out and just going east to west and not really taking a bump up. In fact, a lot of prices on OG dual lands and a lot of the big horseman cards, the staples of the reserve list, the playable ones around the $500 to $1,000 mark, they're actually softening in price and becoming a little more affordable. So how does that even make sense? Now, I know we've seen a lot of price volatility in the past with reserve list buyouts and cards spiking up in price, but I can't help but think that there's a bit of a disconnect between the Magic market and the rest of the financial market when it comes to the amount of money that's been printing out. The cost of a loaf of bread on one hand goes from $4 to $8, and a head of lettuce goes to $10, but the cost of the reserve list cards that aren't getting printed each and every day or laid from vends is trickling down in price because this is considered a novelty item or a non-essential item. I would much rather have one of every one of the 572 cards on the Magic the Gathering reserve list than $130,470 US dollars in cash today. Because the amount of cash that they keep printing and the show and the bandwagon that Hasbro is going to have to put on the road playing dodgeball with players for the next 2 or 3 quarters this year is going to make for some interesting deals on those cards on the reserve list. So I appreciate you folks for watching, and for those of you who watched right to the end, leave me a comment in the comment section below. And that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you. What would you rather have? $130,470 cash or one of each of the 572 cards on the reserve list?
Points.